Welcome to the Transformation Cafe with your host, Robin Masiewicz. Transformation Cafe, a weekly half hour of light, topical conversation about health, wellness, happiness, personal growth, spirituality, and other insights. We're glad you're here. Transformation Cafe, a fun place to nourish your soul. Now, let's get started and introduce our diners for tonight's show.
Well, hi, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Transformation Cafe. I'm your host, Robin Masiewicz, and we are in our Cafe Book Club. We are in week 5 of Presence by Amy Cuddy. She has the second most watched TED Talk in history, and it was all about the body empowering the mind when it comes to being able to take a position and having the physical changes that go along with that. And my co-host is my sister, Amy Frost. Amy, how are you tonight?
Well, I'm feeling pretty powerful and powerless all at the same time.
That sounds interesting. We might have to delve into that a little bit. And we have Miss Gloria joining us tonight. Hey, Gloria, how are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Great for you to join us. We're so glad that you're here. Yeah, so just to back up just a little bit, I'd love to do a little bit of a recap before we start getting deep into the current chapter. We had episode 289, which is I Don't Deserve to Be Here. And boy, that was all about the imposter phenomenon. And we had all kinds of really great things to talk about that. And it's really working from people really not taking their full potential, their full gifts and abilities seriously, and having it be something that can really hamper your success and being able to be successful out in the world. So really encourage everybody to go to the transformation-cafe.com and check out our current post that we did that. Annie did a great job listing some TED Talks, and just, gosh, we've got all kinds of really wonderful, great information having to do with the imposter. They call it the IP phenomenon. So, Amy, did you have anything that you wanted to talk about that with having that be our last chapter?
I really love how, especially the conversation last week, when I think people don't realize how often they're affected by, feeling like, oh, I don't deserve to be here, I'm not smart enough, whatever. But also we had a great dialogue about the flip side, that there are people who feel like they're qualified and they're really not. And so finding that balance, and I think part of that is us finding our own presence to know and do a lot of good self-assessment, to be self-aware and say, where am I really in terms of my self-mastery, and what kind of work do I need to do, and honoring the work you've already done.
Yeah, Dr. Kim was on our episode last week too, and she just has really great stories about sharing she was going in to teach a class, and she walked in and she just got, she'd prepared for the class all ready to go, and some of the students had traveled like 300 miles to come and see her, and she walked in there and she went blank. And she goes like, I am so sorry. I am blank right now. Everybody laughed and just really loved that she was being able to be just honest and authentic with them in the moment. And as soon as she did that, it was really interesting because she just automatically became present, because she was willing to just own where she was in the moment and just, I think, have a shared experience with everybody in the room, and was able to have the information come back to her and be able to continue class. But we just, from that, we really started getting into mastery, and I think it was just a really great episode. So, yeah, I really want to encourage people to go back and check that. That was, again, TC 289. So tonight we're going to be talking about the powerlessness that shackles the self and how power sets us free. And I always really love Amy Cuddy. She really does a great job with putting the little quotes in there that really help to kind of frame what we're talking about. It says, most powerful is he who has himself in his own power. And that was back in 4 BC. So we definitely, what goes around comes around. And it's interesting how you always hear these quotes from, and they're still prevalent today sometimes, depending on what we're talking about. So with this chapter, we're really starting to look at the social self. We're looking at the personal self and just some of the different things inhibiting us. We start out with a story that Dr. Cuddy talks about with Casey. She was a very well-known a physical athlete. She was a field champion when she was in college. And then after her career was ended, successful career, she decided to get into real estate. And it was just such a totally new thing for her that she started having problems perceiving herself. She came from looking at being self-perceived with a loss of power and strength, and followed that by just feeling insecure and had anxieties and discouragement and defeat, which is all these different things that really which is so surprising for her, considering, the physical manifestation of this powerlessness that came along with just not having a sense of confidence. And that's just a really great summary of what it's like to be coming from that place of powerlessness. So, Amy, did you want to jump in with that and talk about that whole story with her?
Yeah, I want to go backwards a little bit, though. I want to go to the very beginning of the chapter. And first off, when you talked about the quote that you cited about the powerful is he who has himself in his own power. And I was working on my master's in spiritual psychology for 2 years. And every time we'd go to start a session, the leaders would always say, all right, everybody, take a nice deep breath and center yourself in yourself. And I'd look around the room and go, does anybody else not know what the heck they're talking about? What does that mean? And so, it's funny, I acted like I knew what I was doing. But eventually it's sort of like, oh, all right, that it's really anchoring in with that true self and who you are, centering yourself within yourself. So that just really helps me to take a nice deep breath and really get myself in that position, like the power stance that she's talked about earlier. So on page 111, she talks about how she hears stories of personal powerlessness every day in emails and conversations, during meetings, all kinds of things. But she says, although the details differ, the basic sketch is often the same. A change is accompanied by a self-perceived loss of power and strength, and followed by feelings of insecurity and anxiety, discouragement and defeat. Then comes physical manifestation of powerlessness, along with a loss of confidence and ambition. And what I really love, so that's the second paragraph on 111. Then in the third paragraph, this sentence about took my breath away. They said, then, in that position, opportunities take on the aspect of threat to be avoided. And the feeling of fear further reinforces our sense of powerlessness, keeping us locked in an exhausting cycle.
Yeah, I thought that was really, I agree with you on that. So, when you go into page 112, she talks about the whole, the difference between powerfulness. It says power makes us approach circumstances or opportunities, and powerlessness makes us avoid them. And boy, that was really a wake up for me to be hearing it. I mean, I think on some levels I knew that, but the way that she put that was just so powerful.
Well, and started looking at how does that apply to me. In this last week, my husband nearly died, and I found myself being afraid to go to the hospital. I'm afraid to talk to the doctors. What if I heard something that I couldn't deal with? So instead of, oh, great, here's an opportunity to make this better, I had gotten in some fear. And again, I feel very powerless and powerful in the situation, depending on when you're talking to me. And noticing, like today, we went to a doctor's appointment, and I felt I was ready. I had prepared, and I felt very powerful. And I even had to go toe to toe. And there were some prescriptions that were on the docs there that I was like, we really need to talk about this. But before, now it looks, he's going to recover. But earlier in the process, they were talking about he may not. So I think I totally lost my power. And whatever the doctor said, okay, fine, give him 20 different prescriptions. Give him blood transfusions, do whatever you have to do. And so I feel like shifting in my own power based on where I was able to stand.
Yeah, one of the things along with that in that page, it says, when we feel powerless, we cannot be present. And I was thinking about that too, about not from that sense of, like you're saying, you're reeling. It's like when we went back and we were talking about the looping of the mind. You can get caught up in all these different things that are happening when you're powerless. I think it's almost like there's a sense of fight and flight that's activated. Mm-hmm. That's really because causing you on a very, even maybe on a subconscious level, that you're just really kind of tracking and figuring out what's going on just from moment to moment for a sense of protection for yourself when you're not really present. Because, I think you got to go, there's probably a certain part of ourselves that goes on automatic pilot to be able to be maintaining when we're not present. So thank God for that, that there's a part of our systems that really do that for ourselves. And then Amy Cuddy gets into really questioning if power corrupts or not. And I love what she said on that. She said, should we be troubled by the presence-power connection? I mean, power corrupts, right? Maybe so, but power can liberate us too. In fact, I'm going to be making a bold claim. powerlessness is at least as likely to corrupt us as power is. And she goes into this whole thing about talking about corruption. She had a quote from Howard Thurman, author and a civil rights leader, who wrote on the subject and says, "There is something in every one of us that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have. And if you cannot hear it, you will all of your life spend your days on the ends of the strings of someone else pulling it." So I thought that was really great in thinking about when it just comes from, like you're saying, Amy, you were caught up in the fear of maybe having something going tragically wrong with your husband, and really just saying, well, give him whatever he needs, right? Instead of having it be more on a conscious level. It's just like we're in an emergency mode here. What's really going to work in this moment as to pause, as looking at it in the long run of is that really going to be beneficial for him? When you're coming from an emergency situation, you're definitely not, looking at every little thing besides, what's just going to help him survive and be able to thrive just in that moment. So I think that was such a interesting circumstance for you to be having something like that you could reflect on in having this in the chapter.
Absolutely. And I think with you, Gloria, in terms of, what we've been saying about being present and powerful and powerlessness, is anything striking a chord for you?
Well, from a personal standpoint, you can... You just have to remember to breathe, and that you can only control what you can control, and then you look for the solutions that people don't think about, to think outside the box.
I think so much of it is, you get so caught up in, again, it's either are you coming from fear or are you coming from confidence, and being able to say, how do I tap into that even when I don't feel so confident?
Sometimes you just have to live the moment and get through the roller coaster just to be able to find your balance again.
Yeah, I love how Amy Cuddy was, the whole saying of fake it till you make it. Just like fake it till you're behaving that way. There's a matter of behaving it and just making it a part of your, your normal way that you are with things. So I think that's what we're really talking about too, is coming to that point of steering it into, what's true for you on a regular basis. So that was really true.
Well, and I don't know, I really wouldn't even call it faking it. And they say, if you smile, that, you're physiologically start changing and you start feeling happier. So I don't think it's particularly faking it, but knowing if I take this action, it can lead to me being in a more centered, happier state. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect sense to me. And that really, it goes into the chapter that much more too, because later on we talk about that, how you can be your own, basically trigger for yourself. You can be your own one who basically starts the ball going when it comes to things like that. You can be your own, primed it. You can prime yourself. You can be your own primer.
Yeah. And she's on 130 at the top here. She says, "Power can incite action." And the quote that Angela Davis is, "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept."
Right.
So Robin, how would you put that in? How could you put that into action in your life right now?
Well, I'm getting ready for Valentine's Day, and I'm a florist. So there's a lot of little things that I get done now. So when I'm busier, priming it for myself, and just having that confidence of knowing that, I've had all these years of experience. I think more that, we have an exercise later on when we're looking at being able to feel empowered. And there's been a couple in the whole different exercises and stuff, chapter by chapter, when they talk about that, when you're feeling personally powerful. And I think, it's that switch that we can turn on for ourselves. So just remembering the successes that I've had and the things that I've done in the past that have been very successful and made it easier. So I think part of that is the way that I've been able to prime myself, and just knowing it on a confidence level what I've been able to accomplish before. So I think that's interesting. And here we're talking about an athlete who was at the top of her game, and yet she switched careers. She switched her positions of going to something that wasn't a primed skill for herself. and having that sense of not feeling confident in the ways that she was able to move herself forward. So a lot of it's like, could she have been in a place where she had a mentor that was showing her even the baby steps that she was making in her being able to change into a different career, that she was being successful? I think that's one reason why it's so great to be able to have a coach or a mentor when you're moving into something that you're interested in, but yet there's that large learning curve that you're still having to contend with. So there's something to go along with that.
And then interesting, I hadn't thought of it like that before, but the way you say that, you can dovetail on somebody else's power, that in their confidence, like a coach or, somebody who is a mentor who's guiding you. That's a really interesting thought, Robin. I love that. And when you're talking about preparing for what you're going to do, and maybe, we have a mentor group that meets weekly, and we support each other, and sometimes we dovetail off of each other's courage and their power, which I think courage and power go hand in hand. But on page 118, it talks about feeling powerless impairs thoughts. And I love what you talked about with getting ready. It's going to be crazy on Valentine's Day and before that with all the different orders and making things right and people having demands. But he talks about that when you're feeling powerlessness, your brain starts becoming unable to handle the demands of complexity or stressful situations. And anxiety takes a wallop on our memory and our ability to recall old information while simultaneously taking in, integrating, responding to new data. Everything starts going kind of haywire. So that's why it's really important, really smart to be making those lists, making sure who's going to do what, because if you get knocked off center, somebody's upset about something, rightly or wrongly, and you're feeling out of power, the whole brain can start shutting down.
Yeah, and it goes into the next one, which is powerless makes us self-absorbed, and that's really interesting too, because once we're in that place of feeling powerlessness, the sense of our being able to focus and having the working memory, and we desperately are attempting to navigate. There's a sense of that you start looking into the just your sense of yourself, and it really folds into people not feeling well, and you really start having you're just that self-absorption where everything is bi-directed back into yourself about feeling depressed and tired and upset stomachs and things like that. You get very focused on your body as opposed to everything else that's going on around you. And that made me think of our episode that we had done that was TC 281 before we started the second book that was called Character of Resilience, and it went into the chapter with The Road to Character by David Brooks. And I really want to encourage, I actually went back and listened to that today, and it was really great looking at resilience from just a different perspective when it comes to being in power. And, when you come from a situation of powerlessness, one of the reasons I did that episode was we had just had that incident in San Bernardino where we had all that horrible shooting that had come about, and then, we had our incident in France. So I really wanted to just encourage people to come from that level of resilience and really, respect and honor what had happened to others, but yet really have that much more of a zest for life, because in honoring our lives, we would be honoring them. So just putting that forward and having it be in a different way of being able to, instead of, having it being empowering on whatever we could to be able to do that. So the reality is that people just aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are, even when you are actually the center of attention. There was a story about coaches that Amy Cuddy had gone, and she was interviewing a Major League Baseball team. And it was interesting. They were talking about the players were really put off every week because they would, the announcers always give the stats of, where everybody is with their batting average and things like that. And the reality is that it really caused them to not be focused in the way that they needed to. And they said even when they were actually the center of attention, there was nothing that they could do about it anyway, because, here they were, their job was to hit the ball, but yet they had all these other things that were running for themselves that were pulling away from just their sense of power, because it was really hard for them to be able to focus. So what did you think about that when they were talking about the powerlessness that prevented presence, Amy?
I know it really rings true. And it's about how do I make sense of that for myself. And that I see it happening all the time. Working with people who are in transition, that it just like knocks your knees out from underneath you. And it's really challenging to be present when you're feeling powerless. And so I think part of that is that what does that mean for me? How do I make sense of that? I want to jump back to 115 to kind of bring that together with this. For me, I feel like I've lived a good life and I've done a lot of good things and I feel like I'm a good person. But I do have regrets for things that I did before I really started living consciously. And I would have to say that really happened through the course of working on my master's in spiritual psychology. And now it's about, I don't have regrets. I may wish things had turned out differently, especially when you're working with people in crisis. Even, at the flower shop, people are coming in. They're not just buying flowers or gifts. They're trying to fix relationships, or they're trying to build relationships. And so there's a being off-centered and a powerlessness in that. And it can come from a power place too. But if you start recognizing that in yourself and then all your clients and everybody you're working with. So on page 115 at the top here, I love how she says, personal power is all about having the confidence to act based on one's beliefs, attitudes, and values, and having the sense that one's actions will be effective. Effective in this context does not mean that we'll always get the result we desire. Instead, it means that we will come away from every interaction feeling that we fully and accurately represent who we are and what we want. And I think that's about living in no regrets. And so it's about really getting clear, and that's what the work that we've been doing in Big Magic and this is like, who am I really? What am I here to do? And how do I do that? Is consciously and in a place of power that's not corrupted.
Yeah, I love how she talks about that too. And she says, be sure that we are present with our boldest and most sincere self, because you really can't control the outcome of any, of the variables that are going on, but you can control what's going on within yourself. And I think that's really an important message and something really important to remember when it comes to, what is power and how am I able to really make a difference with all those different things. So
I've done quite a bit of work on this because I think it's all our personal work, right? I mean, power and powerlessness. And so some of the things that have helped me that I want to toss out here, the steps to, really understanding your own authentic power is to take some time to journal on a couple of questions. When do you feel powerful? And when do you feel powerless? Mm-hmm. And then kind of being like, oh, what does that feel like? And even what would be the stance that I would take when I felt powerful? What stance would I take when I felt powerless? And then maybe, for the next week, watching yourself and taking good notes, like we talk about. It's always about taking good notes. And then once you start seeing that, like, oh, so this is what powerful feels like, then what are some things that you can do to help empower yourself? So those are, I think, 3 very powerful questions that you can take time to really be with, and then the difference. So I know for me, in times when I'm feeling powerless, I start watching myself and go, okay, what's going on? And like, okay, what are the things that I need to do to feel powerful? Well, like working with these doctors, I need to get some information. So I start talking to people that I know have information that would be helpful. That helps me feel more powerful. I meditate, and I get myself centered. Before I go to talk to somebody I know it's going to be conflict, I make sure I have bail money.
Yeah, that's good.
Starting to interject.
Bail money is always a good idea. Yeah, always a good idea. In going into the chapter fuller, there's 2 different sections that Amy Cuddy puts together about the benefits of feeling powerful and also just the different dynamics when it comes to powerlessness, when having those things about, just to review that real quick. Powerlessness, she was talking about in the different sections, is it impairs our thoughts. We become self-absorbed. There's ways that it actually prevents us from being present. And powerfulness, it's just so cool because it talks about how it protects us, connects us, it liberates our thinking, it synchronizes us, ignites our action, and our actions are more effective. And I really love what she talked about when it comes about it being able to connect us, because she talks about people who are powerful are also more likely to forgive others. So part of that, I think, is like Dr. Kim was talking about that last week, as she said, how do I know? We were asking ourselves, how do I know I'm present? How do I know that I'm working from a level of being powerful? And she said, look at the people around you, and are they blossoming? Are they thriving from your presence and having having a way that you can impact them in your lives? And I think that's a good example when you're more likely to be someone who can forgive others. It just shows the more open-hearted, and we talked about heart math the other day about being able to be connected and take those 3 deep breaths, and then coming from, think about something positive on that last breath that makes you feel good, or it just reminds you of successes that you've had, and being able to bring that into yourself. So that's always a really wonderful exercise to be able to do that. Being able to liberate our thinking and then being able to synchronize ourselves. So there's just, it's neat to have, how do I know that I'm coming from more of a power aspect of myself, and having these things that are, the little markers, little, things along the way that are helping us. And, and Amy had already read that Angela Davis quote that was really great about, no longer accepting the things that you can't change, and changing the things that, you can't accept. I think that's a really powerful place to be with that. So, and then in the end of it, looking at the power that affects our physiology, we're going to get into the next chapter is getting into body language, and really getting into that TED Talk that Dr. Cuddy had done on being able to, like Amy had said, taking that powerful stance of being able to bring it into the body and embodying, having an embodiment with that. One thing that was interesting is before the end of the chapter, they were talking about corruption again. And I wanted to go ahead and read. I thought this was a really wonderful thing. It came from looking at personal power as the danger of possession of social power. And there's a professor at the Claremont Graduate University that really studies behavior and organizational sciences, Tazik Zazem. Hopefully I said that pretty correctly. And his quote was, "Here's my hope. Because personal power is infinite and does not require us to in any way control someone else. We don't have a sense of scarcity about it. We don't feel that we have to compete to keep it. It's ours whatever happens. It can't be taken away by someone else, and that knowledge, that understanding, facilitates the desire to share it, to help others realize the same. And so I believe that personal power, unlike social power, becomes contagious. The more personal power we feel, the likelier it is that we will want to be able to help others and share others." I thought that was just really a great quote, talking about really coming from personal power, it's contagious, and really wanting to share that with others, because it just lifts us all up to a level. And then at the end, they were talking about power doesn't always corrupt. Power can cleanse. What I believe is always true about power is that power always reveals, and that personal power can bring us closer to the best of ourselves, while the lack of it distorts and obscures ourselves. So, power really can reveal us into the paths of, things that we couldn't even imagine for ourselves, when we finally realize who we are and being real, and really just bringing our best and our authentic self to just every situation. So I just really wanted to end with that and remind everybody that, again, we're going to be going to the language of power. And I love the beginning of this next chapter with Ralph Waldo Emerson. "What you speak so loudly, I cannot hear what you are saying." And we'd actually talked about that from another show. So we'll be bringing that full circle when we do our next show. So any last words or thoughts, Aim?
I think spend some time when you think about power. It's like electricity. You can use it to light a building, or you can use it to electrocute. You need to look at, how am I using power? And I send Andy the questions that we were talking about earlier, so you can put them on the transformation-cafe.com.
Yeah, and I really want to encourage everybody to go to the forum and go ahead and go ahead and let us know what you're thinking about those things. And we enjoy your comments and your ideas. So really want to encourage everybody again to go into transformation-cafe.com. And even check out our store. We will have different items and links for different information on that. So, as always, want to thank Miss Gloria and Amy for joining us here at the cafe. Thank you, ladies, and we'll see you next time here. Thanks for joining us.
We hope you enjoyed listening to the Transformation Cafe podcast. To learn more, visit transformation-cafe.com for show notes, guest information, and links to previous shows. You can also subscribe to the Transformation Cafe podcast on iTunes. Join us again next time at the Transformation Cafe, a fun place to nourish your soul.